So it's been about a year since I uploaded my very first video to YouTube. It's called the DIY Table Saw Workstation. And if you've not seen that video yet, you can click right over here. It's a short little video. When I produced that video, I wasn't convinced how many people would actually find that interesting, so I kind of glossed over certain aspects of what I did. So I thought I'd take a moment and go over some of the more commonly asked questions. Now, to be fair, I'm only going to cover part 1 of the Table Saw Workstation series of videos today. For the other builds in that series, more in-depth videos will follow. The first thing I knew needed to be done if I was going to place a top over the whole workstation was to deal with that dust collection system. Dust collection, as I said in the blog post for the video, was basically non-existent, and to be honest, it's still kind of non-existent. What I had done was enclose a section under the base cabinet that saw sits on, drill some holes under the saw, then drill a hole on the back side of the workstation. That was supposed to accept a shop vac hose, thereby creating a downdraft and, by extension, dust collection. Well, that was the theory anyway. Yeah, that never worked. The holes would get clogged easily and dust would collect inside the saw. That would force me to remove the saw from the workstation to remove the sawdust. Yeah, tedious. If I was going to put a top over everything, I had to do something about that. So I decided I was going to cut a large opening under the saw. That way the dust wouldn't collect inside the saw anymore. Instead, it just flies all over the place, which is so much better. Someone did have a suggestion to put a pull-out drawer underneath. The drawer could then be emptied periodically. I like this suggestion. I have plans to do that suggestion. Obviously, I've not gotten around to that suggestion. When I do, it'll be another shop project for all you shop project lovers out there. So as the saying goes, the old had to be removed in order to make room for the new. So it was off with the old tabletops and on with the new one. Now here's a bit of a behind the scenes tidbit, if you will. If you go to the blog post on my website for this particular video, you'll see that I referenced 3/4 of an inch for the top. In reality, this is 1/2 inch. I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to save on weight. 1/2 inch is obviously lighter than 3/4 of an inch. Two, I wanted to save as much of the cut depth of the blade as I could. However, that didn't work because for some reason, and I don't know why, because it seems obvious to me now, my brain didn't connect the two synapses that would have taken into account the difference between the depth of the aftermarket miter gauge that I wanted to use and the depth of a 1/2 inch piece of ply. When I routed the miter slot in the top, I was actually left with one single piece of ply before going all the way through. So what I ended up doing was throwing a 1/4 inch piece of Luan ply underneath it, and at the end of the day, I ended up with 3/4 of an inch. Now that brings me to a very common question that I get, which is, do I miss that 3/4 of an inch loss in cut depth? I always answer that by saying I never used all of the cut depth anyway. So I guess the short answer to that question is no. Now, two people actually asked two separate questions that intertwine with each other. One was, do I need a table saw insert? Why can't I just put a top on there and then raise the blade through it? And then the second one was, how did I get everything square? Well, the first actually leads to the second. Measuring and marking where the insert will be is actually somewhat important to getting the blade square with the front of the top. Because if you don't cut this, then you have no way of knowing when the blade comes up if it'll be square with anything, really. So the question is, after you have the insert cut, how do you square it with the front of the table? Well, grab yourself a framing square. Raise the blade as high as it'll go. Lay the square against the blade and make sure it doesn't contact any of the teeth. Then you can adjust the top until you are good to go. For the miter slot, all I did was lay a straight edge clamp against the blade as I did with the framing square, then make a pass with the router. The distance from the blade was arbitrary for the miter slot. I didn't have a special measurement for that. Well, that covers the more common questions I've received about part 1 of the Table Saw Workstation series of videos. Well, all except one, design plans, a cut list, and materials. You can find that at my website, simplyeasydiy.com. Hey, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Check me out on Facebook and Pinterest. If you like this video, here's a couple more you'll like as well. Until then.